Hello, qualitative researchers. Here's a quick overview of Chapter 7, Data Collection. I want you to be all versed in that, even though in this course we do not go actually into data collection, but it is important information to behold and know about, and that's why we're definitely going over this. I know you've all read your chapter, so hopefully this is not all new. And as we know, we learn through repetition, especially when things are new to us. So questions for discussion that Creswell and Poth suggest are the following here, a couple key ones. What are the steps in the overall data collection process? I think that is important. Ethical considerations is continuously on our minds when we do qualitative research because we work with people, not just with numbers. How does a researcher find people or places to study? That's important. Access and rapport issues. What decisions can influence the selection of a purposeful sampling strategy? What type of information is typically collected? How is information recorded? Common issues in collecting data. How is the information stored? This is all connected to safety, of course, as well. And also, how are the 5 approaches different in terms of data collection? So those are important things to consider. Now, as we look at the data collection activities, at the center here, we see in figure 7.1, we see the importance of ethical considerations. That is huge, so to speak. And if we pay attention to all these items in data collection activities, we can look at them each one and spend probably 10-15 minutes on those. So make sure you take a deeper dive into this. Of course, we need to locate a site or a person or persons, individuals that we want to collect data from. We need to gain access and we need to develop rapport. We can't just start asking them deep questions. We sample in a purposeful manner. In qualitative research, we always look for who has experienced the clear phenomenon at hand. That's absolutely important. If we have people that maybe have experienced parts of the phenomenon, but it's not totally clear, then we get diffuse data or no good data at all because they can't tell us anything about the phenomenon at hand. Collecting the data, there's a process, recording information that is done digitally, minimizing field issues when you are with people talking, storing data securely. These are all important activities in the data collection process. Moving along, the data collection by approach. This is probably where I recommend you spend the most time because it tells you based on narratology, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, or case study, it tells you what are some of the activities and how they might differ from approach to approach. So, for example, the first question, what is traditionally studied? Sites or individuals. In narratology, you look at single individual, accessibility, and distinctive by their stories of experience. In phenomenology, oftentimes you look at multiple individuals who have experienced the phenomenon. In grounded theory, you also look at multiple individuals who have responded to an action or participated in a process about a central phenomenon. So we learn about the process. In ethnography, you're looking at members of a culture sharing group or individuals representative of that group or a group. In a case study, we study a bounded system such as a process, an activity, an event, a program, or multiple individuals. And so that's important to go through these, and then you can, for example, the last questions, what type of information typically is collected, what forms of data, and phenomenology, one of my favorites, it's interviews with a range of people. Anywhere between 5 to 25 is usually what we see. So this is where you want to be at home. This is where you want to spend time on. This is what you want to be able to teach on this topic, to measure and say, like, I know this stuff pretty good. Okay. Let's move forward here. More here on data collection by approach. This is slide 2. How is the information recorded? What are common data collection issues? In phenomenology, as an example, bracketing one's experiences or previous knowledge. Logistics of interviewing is an issue as well. So yes, be at home in these slides, very important. So as you saw earlier, we're going to go into some of the details and the ongoing ethical considerations. Data collection, site or individual. Narratology, it is usually find an individual or more individuals, and the facet of relationships is important. The phenomenology and grounded theory need not be single site. Ethnography need single site. We need a single site. In a case study, single or multiple sites. So this is about site or individual. We're looking at making some decisions on that. The ethical considerations are when it comes to doing qualitative research is always anonymity. So we assign numbers or aliases. So we never use the real names. Many times in an interview, we do say the real name to not create distance or some sense of oddness in the interview. If we use a wrong name or a different name, we don't say, hey, participant 1, can you tell me about this experience that you've had? We want to say the first name, but at the moment of data transcription, we want to assure people that their data is anonymized by assigning a number or aliases like participant 1, or I used inversed first letters when I interviewed couples, for example. Explaining to participants the purpose of the study, be aware of information shared off the record that may be harmful, that may harm individuals if reported. Become familiar with context and be respectful of marginalized populations. So, ethical consideration. Become an ethical expert, not only in your field. If you're an LPC, then you need to be an ethical expert as to your ethical code. If you are a social worker, you really need to know the ethics codes, obviously. If you are a researcher, you need to know the ethics around each approach and how they differ. It's very important. Institutional review boards, submit a proposal. We all do this in our individually guided study. We submit an HSRC proposal, and it needs to be logical. You need to answer all the questions, and you need to make sure that you understand what goes into an HSRC approval. Most qualitative studies are expedited, so there shouldn't be many risks there. If there are minors involved or vulnerable population, then there usually is a full review. We don't recommend to even propose that just because it delays the approval process, and qualitative studies are lengthy anyways. So you want to be able to do something that is at least expedited. So argue the, this is the institutional review board. I'm going to leave it at that. Everything is in the paper that you're supposed to submit in week 14. I believe it's week 14 for your HSRC paperwork. So ongoing here, the site or individual, that's continued. You want to talk to people who want to talk. You almost want to say, duh. Nobody should be manipulated or forced or in any way, shape, or form coerced into any kind of study. Inform participants of your motivation, and let them know they're chosen because they can shed light on something. Okay. In phenomenology, as I mentioned earlier, the individuals must have experienced the phenomenon under study, and they must be able to speak about it. So you see there's a reason for the side of the individual to be chosen and be informed as well. Okay. In ethnography, typically we talk about a single site, and an intact culture sharing group has developed shared values, beliefs, and assumptions. So study these differences so you know how they actually work. That is, the consent form obviously is part of research as well. And the consent form needs to show elements, and this is very important in qualitative research. You have ongoing consent. That means people can withdraw at any time, even in the middle of an interview. They can withdraw and say, I'm not okay with continuing the interview for various reasons. And they don't need to be explained. People can just withdraw. Because you're working with people in a lengthier, during a lengthier time frame, like an interview is typically at least 45 minutes long, things can come up and people might change their minds. And that they need to know from the get-go, so they don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck here. Okay. The central purpose needs to be clearly explained to people in the consent form. What I do is I do written consent, have people read it, and then before I hit the record button in an interview, for example, I go over some of the basic elements again in a very rapport building kind of way. Hey, I just want to make sure you're absolutely okay with what we're doing. Here's what we're doing again, and here's the main elements. And you can leave at any time and give people that total agency over their choices. I do explain how things are confidential, how that works, the risks of participation, the benefits that could come from this, and obviously needing a signature of the participant and the researcher under a consent form. No research should happen without HSRC approval and without a very well worked out consent form. Hope that makes sense. If anybody is doing any research online or with emails or on their own, that is inappropriate and unethical. So let's raise our standards always and make sure we are not doing things that are questionable. All right? So I know sometimes people do things innocently. They start interviews, or they do things in church or cell groups, or I've seen it all, basically. And I know I'm not saying you do this, but I am saying this happens, and I encourage you to raise your bar to the highest level when it comes to ethical research. Purposeful sampling strategy. Of course, we need to find the sites of the individuals that we need to study. And the size is, of course, important as well. A typology of sampling strategies is listed here. Oftentimes, I use a mixture of purposeful sampling and snowball or chain sampling. That means I know the people that I want to address, like I told you about the studies I do among North American senior pastors. And then I ask them to please forward the link to my study to their senior pastor network, and that is operating in the U.S. currently, and that is a snowball type of sampling. So study the types of methods that you can use, sampling strategies. It goes on here, as you can see. and that's important for you to be able to say what type of sampling strategy you use and why that is a sampling strategy that you want to use. Forms of data collection. Observations, those are field notes that are taken while you are in a setting. Interviews, close to open-ended. Most interviews are semi-structured, and there's an article listed under course resources, and I want you to know how to set up a semi-structured interview. It's good knowledge to have. There's existing documents that could be analyzed. There's audiovisual materials like websites, photos, videos, sounds, and text messages. Those are all legitimate forms of data collection. However, most of what we do is geared around interviews. Observations is obviously important, depending on if you're doing ethnography, that is a must. Nonetheless, you have to be versed on the ethical issues with that. For a student to be embedded into an ethnography study where you live or work with a certain setting, that has some ethical issues implemented there that need to be considered. So we're very careful around these things at Regent University, just because we want our students to do things that are safe, especially most of us are doing this for the first time. There are new ways of data collection, that is online data collection, virtual focus groups, for example, internet message boards. It gets very tricky again here around the ethics. Arts-based research methods, visual ethnographies. So there are other ways and emerging ways that data collection can happen, and we have other things to be considering these days with artificial intelligence that are going to challenge us to some degree. The procedures for interviews. Determine open-ended research questions. That means we want to know about something and we want the participants to tell us about it. So it needs to be open-ended. Interviews are not journalistic or endeavors. We don't ask for yes or no or got you questions, or this is all bad journalism that we see these days all over the place. Journalism has literally degenerated. What we need in research is open-ended research questions, and to then be able to come up with identifying the interviewees, what kind of interview are we doing, appropriate recording procedures are usually, it's totally fine to use your cell phone and record the interview. You just need to make sure that you then eliminate it from your phone, upload it safely to a encrypted cloud service. It's not okay to have it on your laptop if your laptop is accessible to other people. So password protected materials, absolute key. Don't use your password that you made up for all your other accounts. Use a password manager who creates a very undecipherable password for you and save it in your password manager. And that is how you get the best protection for a uploaded interview into the cloud or wherever you keep things. Keep things separate from your private and your research endeavors. And those are some of the basic things. There should be no way anybody in your family or who accidentally needed to use your computer or have access to your computer be able to see any kind of interviews anywhere. Don't save it on an external hard drive where other people have access to it. Everything must be protected. Only you and the research team must have access. Okay? I hope that helps you be very strict with what you want to be doing to protect people. Because your interviews, remember, may have some private information and first names in it, and we don't want this to ever get into anybody else's hand, but the research team who themselves have signed off on the informed consent to vow and protect people's identity, to not do harm to anyone. So that was a very lengthy statement here, but I really want to urge you to do it that way. Okay? Use an interview protocol, refine it, do some pilot testing, do some dry run interviews when you do interviews. Be in a distraction-free place. You can't think deeply if there are kids running around, or Sunday school is just out and you are meeting with somebody, or worse, people just walk into a room. So like with clients and counseling, you must protect confidentiality and be in a distraction-free place, otherwise you can't do research. Obtain the consent, have good interview procedures, and decide on the transcription logistics. How do you transcribe interviews? I'm a big fan. There are softwares out there that transcribe for you. That is good, like In Vivo and some others. But it is not a bad idea to transcribe an interview personally, and find ways to do a deep dive into your first run through the interview. Transcription typically can help you do that. The types of observation, there's different types. Complete participant, that does help establish a rapport. Excuse me. The participant as observer, a non-participant observer as participant, researcher as an outsider, and the complete observer. So types of observation. Excuse me. Let me have a little bit more coffee here. Oh. A friend of mine made this cup. Nice, huh? Pottery. Doing pottery is her therapy, she says. She made me a cup. Nice. Several cups. Steps for observation. This is when you are actually doing observation on a site. I'm going to go skip over this. You can all study and read this, just because we are going to tend to do less observation or direct observation for this course as a focus. I did talk about recording procedures already. There is the interview protocol, of course. There's observational protocol. When we talk about field issues, again, I'm going to go through this a little quicker since we don't want to be focusing too much on actual field node observational methods. Even if you do interviews, you can write down observations that you have as a researcher being in the room with people. So those are technically field notes as well. So there's entry and organizational access. If you study a culture sharing group, for example, let's say a fan club of, I just made this up, I don't know why, like aggressive roller skating. I don't even know if that is something like this. I think there was a movie a few years back with roller skating team or whatever. I don't know. I probably didn't watch it. Somehow that just came to mind. Completely Freudian, like things that I just came to mind. Free association. But you need to get access to that group. You can't just go there. You need to ask one of the leaders or get permission from the group to say, hey, I'm doing this study. I would like to just be with you for a while. Embed yourself for a week or on their regular meetings or something like that. So that is entry and organizational access. Procedures for observations, like what is your role? How is that data going to be collected? What is the dynamic between you and the interviewee? That is when you do an interview. And when you're talking about documents and audiovisual materials, how do you locate those materials? I had a student one time wanting to analyze the speeches that people do at AA when they're done with it. Well, they're never done really, but when they graduate, there's this, I forgot the name of it now. I should know this, but she said there's a speech people talk about. It's like a testimonial. And she was going to interview that. That was already recorded, and we talked about, well, if you want to do that, we need to get access to those audiovisual materials, and what kind of permission would we need? Are these public records? Then you don't have to get individual permission, but if they're not public records, then it gets a bit tricky. Okay, so again, we're protecting people, we're protecting privacy, individual rights, and that is all part of that. Data storage and handling. I talked to you about this earlier. Absolutely important. It's amazing how much innocently, oftentimes, but how much danger people put participants through just not knowing technology. So we need backup on everything that we record. So oftentimes I use a digital recorder and my phone, using high quality equipment. So we're not just guessing at words later on in the transcription process. What is the master list of information types? What all are we collecting? Protecting anonymity, and then definitely, I want you to handle it with passwords created by password managers. Please don't create your own passwords. They're often identifiable, and these days passwords can be cracked and found out. So please let a password manager develop complex passwords, different for each storage system, and also, if possible, do two-factor authentication. That's a minimum these days on password security. 5 approaches compared. There are some nice slides here that you can look at, and that would end chapter 7. I always promise or say I'll do a quick run through. This is a quick run through. We'll go through it more during our collaborative times. In this course, we do not go into data collection, but part of this course is that you are versed with the different types of data collection methods for each approach and the ethical issues surrounding those approaches and qualitative research in general. Therefore, I pray and hope that you have a good working knowledge of data collection methods. Blessings to all of you.